Hello, good morning, or good evening. Stones, do you have your paper? Great. Very good. And then, so we have you two, and then your little one, and another little one, correct? Two little ones, so the four of you, and Cammie, and then John Mills is going to join with us as well. So let's set a time for our practice on that Saturday morning. So October 2nd, I have a retreat and a talk in the morning. So why don't we do our practice at 11:30 a.m.? Is that okay? Yes. That will be our first confession for those who've been baptized. For those who've not been baptized, we'll go through confession. We'll just do a blessing at the end of it, and then we'll go through the rites themselves. Okay? For those who've been with us, if you want to come to that practice just to see the rites and how we're doing it and everything else, you're welcome to do so. And obviously, I hope that you'll be there at Mass that night whenever we come. Please, yes. And it would be good for them to either go to confession prior to that or at that morning. Be best if they could go to another time of confession, that way we can move it through, but they should go to confession before they go to the 7 p.m. Mass.
That's October 3rd, right?
Second, Saturday, October 2nd. And we can bet on that being a couple hours. Okay, so you might want to eat before you come. Make sense? Okay. Nope. White would be appropriate because it's a baptismal color. You're welcome to do so, but there's no requirements on that. We will have a white stole that we'll give you for those who are. I don't think anybody's being baptized. You guys have been baptized, so we're not going to go through the baptisms. So it'll be the profession of faith, it'll be the confirmation, it'll be first communion, things like that. So it'll be pretty straightforward as far as the rites are concerned. So, question?
So all three of ours will be kids will be baptized.
Correct. Yep. And so, yeah, so I have to go back on my word on that. Adults are not being baptized. The kids are being baptized. So we'll get through with the kids. They'll be baptized first, and then we'll confirm you guys all. How old's the oldest?
He's
6, okay. What's that?
You went there to practice as well.
Um,
It would be several hours.
yeah. The only one who could probably make it the whole time is the 6-year-old, if you wanted him here. Because he's old enough to be able to walk up and practice, laying your head over and things like that. The other one's how old? 4. So he'll just do what we do. So it's up to you. If you think that 2 hours is too long, then I would not bring more than the 6-year-old. If you think it'd be engaging, interesting for him to see what's going on and he'd get more out of the ceremony. 6-year-olds, they have a facility for understanding. So that's fine. If you'd like to do it at home, you'll just walk up with him and the sponsors will just all walk up with them to help them do. And we'll go through the baptismal rite together just right up here. So in other words, they don't have to. Awesome. It's been a whirlwind, on one level, these RCIA classes are like drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much information. And on the other level, there's so much more. Like today, if you haven't gotten your package, there's 2 packages for today. And we're going to spend one day on morality, which quite honestly, is laughable. I mean, and it's, you guys got your packages? You got yours? You guys got any? There's so much information whenever it comes to morality. And you got yours. I've got extras if you'd like to have extras. We'll keep one for John, but you want an extra, or are you cool? Okay. So, for yourselves, your reading for this is a large amount of reading, and that's no fun because there's a lot to process on that. And quite honestly, the moral life is really, let me just say it the way it feels, it's really the day-to-day anxiety of a Catholic. I actually had a guy who was going through conversion into the Catholic faith. He was a Calvin, he was a studied, educated Calvinist. And our conversations were theology. We did RCIA together on the side, and we got into some rip-roaring conversations. Well, the concept of things such as mortal sin and venial sin, that's not in Calvinist theology. And so to wrap your mind around that, trying to adopt a theological perspective that helps understand sin versus temptation, and then this Catholic concept of serious sin versus not serious sin, and how that applies to us, there's a worldview shift. Your mind clicks. And he came in one day into my office, and he slumped down and he goes, "It happened." And I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "I realized today what mortal sin is." And he goes, "I feel it." He goes, "I feel it." So, to begin where I know we need to begin, we need to remember that the earliest title of Christianity was the way. The way. That says a lot. Like, here's the world, and here's the way. I mean, that's audacious. We are the way. Well, what does that mean? It means nothing else is the way. Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one will be saved except by the name of Jesus Christ. Those are big statements. They're statements that we've tackled whenever we ask about salvation outside the church, right? Well, what about people who never heard about Jesus? Are they damned? Well, no, they're not, because God won't condemn anybody according to what they can't know. God's mercy is bigger than all this, but it doesn't change the fact that Jesus is the way. And not only is he the way, but he changes the way we live day in and day out. Day in and day out. And me as a cradle Catholic, my worldview is a daily examine every day of my sin versus my virtues. I mean, it's daily. I went for a bike ride today, and it was on my mind. I woke up this morning, it was on my mind. As a Catholic priest, I go to confession about once a week. And if I start going a little bit longer than once a week, I start feeling badly about that. Now, that's an extreme frequency. You don't have to go to confession once a week. But my conscience and my knowledge of sin, not sin, means that I need to be on my knees in front of the Lord going, stupid, 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 stupid. Or what they said in scriptures, "Depart from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." Peter. Or the tax collector, "Have mercy on me, God, for I am a sinner." And God justifies those who are able to claim themselves sinners. There's a difference between being a sinner in name and being a sinner in fact. A lot of us can give platitude to the title sinner. I'm a sinner. That's kind of like saying, I'm a Martian. I don't know. It can be empty of relevance until you have knowledge of what sin is and is not. And until you realize the effect of sin. So, the way. Christianity is a way. We have chosen to live like no other person lives. Our choices are different. And every human action echoes with an eternal fingerprint. That's the magnitude of Jesus Christ. It's not just that you matter generally, like a mass of humanity, or even that you matter by name, but that every act that you perform matters. Every act has value. Every human freely engaged action is either sinful or sinless, either virtuous or vicious. Every act we do. I had 2 fish fillets and a large fry last night. Pretty sure that was a sin. I mean, okay, so is it a sin? Is it not sin? Well, it certainly was not smart because I had them at 8:30 at night. That means at 4:30 I woke up and, whoa, man, I had a fish fillet and french fries, burp. I mean, not smart, right? We're going to see in the capital sins, gluttony is one of them, In the dietary reality of our worlds, it's so easy for us to eat all that stuff that we're not supposed to, or overeat, I would not have this ab. I don't have abs. I have an ab. Some may call it an abscess, but it is what it is, But our actions have an eternal echo. So much so that St. James in the Bible, biblically relevant, right? So it's easy for us as Catholics to talk about institutional church and that monster that is the hierarchy and blah, 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 and the bishops have said. But whenever we realize that what we say always returns back to revelation found within Scripture that's important for us, the book of James says explicitly, there is such a thing as a deadly sin. Well, that's scriptural, right? So we need to realize that some sins that we perform are spiritual death. Now, you need to remember, at the center of the soul is God, right? And around that is the human spirit. And that's where the little water fountain comes. You remember me talking about this. That water fountain, the interchange between the human and the divine happens in the spirit. There's a human spirit and a divine spirit. The divine spirit is the Trinity that comes to us through baptism. The human spirit is our capacity to have God inside the soul. The human spirit is encased by the soul. And that soul is our human soul that has a psyche and has emotion and has intelligence. And that human soul is inside a body that allows us to interact in community and sociability. And we as humans, as opposed to angels, are embodied spirits. We will never be angels. We hear people say whenever a baby dies, he's an angel in heaven now. Well, okay, that's a nice platitude, and I don't really deny the relevance of that language to realize our child's in God's presence in a spiritual manner being cared for by a loving Father, and is really cute, because all angels are naked babies. That's what we know, right? But nevertheless, we also know that we will get our bodies back at the end of time. In heaven, humans will have flesh. And St. Paul says that all creation is going to be remade. I mean, I don't know if you were old Star Trekkers or not, but whenever, Captain Kirk shot Spock onto the Earth and that remade the entire globe, if you haven't watched it, shame on you! Sin! No, I'm joking. But all of heaven and earth are going to be recreated. There's a physicality even to heaven because there's a physicality to our humanity. And that eternal principle inside us, that divine life inside us, we can close the fountain of God's eternal life within us. There is such a thing as a deadly sin. which means that the exchange of divine and human, it gets shut off, it gets pinched. You know? In a Catholic conscience, therefore, when it comes to morality, we are very keen on the fact that every action of my life has the potential of being a fully free human act. Not all of them are fully free human acts. Okay? There's acts of a human. I can blink. Blinking is not a free human act. It is a human act, it's not a free human act. Our habits, the habits of our life, can also become human acts and not free human acts. So it can be habitual that we eat McDonald's. It can be habitual that we wake up in the morning, we eat breakfast, we eat lunch, we eat dinner, or we don't eat breakfast at all. It can be habitual that we walk a certain way, we talk a certain way. It can be, we can create habits that are so much ingrained in our life that they lose the character of freedom altogether. Okay? But what we want those habits to be is virtuous habits, not vicious habits. So at Clonmel, I had a guy there at Clonmel who was a lovely guy. He took care of our cemetery. It was absolutely wonderful, and the man could cuss like a sailor. You know? He created a habit that was so mindless that it just sort of flowed from his mouth, even though he was an active, lively Catholic taking care of the cemetery who was going to Sunday Mass and doing all these things, but he recreated a habit of just flippantly speaking that should not have been a part of his life. Now, it becomes so normal that it's not really a fully free human act, so it's not going to be sin in the same way as someone who cusses out the bishop or cusses out a police officer. You got to engage in that, right? You got to go to the next level. So whenever we talk about things like there is such a thing as a deadly sin, it is a fully free human act that must make it a deadly sin. In other words, no one sins by accident, especially at the mortal level. You don't trip and accidentally sin. So in our conscience as a Catholic, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our habits are virtuous and our freely chosen acts are always holy. But every single one of those freely chosen acts has the potential of being holy or sinful. And if a freely chosen act is sinful, such as adultery, it can be deadly. And at that moment, your soul is in peril of eternal damnation. Now, I say that explicitly because I don't want to color code it with some sort of softness. Jesus speaks of the wailing and grinding of teeth. Book of Revelation talks of the second death. The first death is the physical death of our body. The second death is eternal separation from the living God. And so we need to be aware of actions that are so serious that if we freely choose that act, we're killing our soul and we're putting ourselves in peril. For example, freely choosing to miss Sunday Mass is a serious sin that can become mortal. Why? Because the worship of the living God is the entire reason why we exist. We were just talking about this out in front. St. Paul literally says in Colossians, we exist to praise the glory of God. Think of that phrase. I mean, apparently I exist for McDonald's at 8:30 at night. We can exist for a lot of funky things, right? I exist, it's kind of interesting. If you were to write a sentence, I exist for. If you tried to not answer according to RCIA or Christian formation, if you just tried to sit there and say, why do I exist? This is where kids who think about suicide, that's really the question they're asking. I was never afraid of a kid who came to talk to me about suicide. Father, I think I'm going to kill myself. First of all, they're talking to me, so they're in no danger. Secondly, the question that they're asking is actually an immature philosophical way of asking a very mature question. Why am I here? Do I matter? If I was to stop existing today, would anything at all change? It's an incredible question. Side note, if you haven't seen, Many Tiny Perfect Things? That's not the right title. Amazon Prime. Tiny Perfect Things. Million Tiny Perfect Things. Phenomenal show that's speaking about daily action, daily life, meaning, purpose, self-definition. So, Tiny Perfect Things. Just look that up in Amazon. But I'm talking like Groundhog Day, right? Groundhog Day. Living it over until you get the point, and then he finally gets the point, and then he's out of the trap, right? The way. Christianity is the way to get out of the trap. I'm watching Mad Men, and I'm actually really sorry that I said that on videotape. It ain't not a Christian show. Ain't not a Christian show. But what a study of human society in a particular echelon at a particular time. For myself, just watching this thinking, do people actually do that? I hear thousands of confessions. I know what people do. But just the audacity of the sinfulness without remorse or regret, and the hypocrisy of some people who call themselves Christian and not living their Christianity, call themselves Catholic and not living their Catholicism. It really is unabashedly secular society kind of thumbing it at Christianity and all Christian values. And really, honestly, the majority of our society lives that way. And we have to ask ourselves, am I living that way? Do I want to live that way? Do I want to give tacit approval to the fact I now have a title, Christian or Catholic? Or do I actually want to be that, the way? Am I actually doing it? And this whole concept of sin, not sin, serious sin versus venial sin, or mortal sin, if something's truly a mortal sin, that if a person freely chose not to go to Mass, or let's say that a person who freely and knowingly chooses to use contraception or to have an abortion, a person who chooses freely to masturbate or to look at pornography, a person who chooses to have fornicative actions, a person who chooses to perjure in court of law, freely and knowingly doing those things. I know this is wrong. I choose it anyways. Pull the trigger. I am done. At that point, I am choosing to shut off the life of Christ within me. Which means that if I die at that moment, I could be condemned. Condemnation happens to those who reject God freely. That's it. But as Catholics in this concept, is she okay? Okay. Just don't let her lick the baby there. Serafina. So the concept of this strikes me more and more and more and more. That on one level, this sounds really terrifying and horrific and negative. And quite honestly, this language is the kind of language that people love to hurl against the Catholic Church in a negativity. You Catholics, you got that Catholic guilt. You just walk around with a cloud on your head. The only thing you want to do is say sin, 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 sin. Think about the way Catholic moms are oftentimes depicted, in whatever show it might be. Judgmental, haughty, looking down on their children, condemnatory. Because Catholics are so verbal whenever it comes to sin or not sin, it's easy for us to look at it tritely, like we're just being so petty and so caustic, negative. It's like, oh, just stop that. Just. But there's a flip side to this. The actual beautiful thing is this. Every human act that is truly, freely human has an eternal value. It's not just that every person has eternal value. That's theoretically very nice to say. Practically speaking, every act that I make as a free human being with my knowledge and my free will, when that engages in it, it has an eternal value. That's how dignified each of us are. So it's not that we're making things trite, it's that the bar is so high because dignity is eternal. And dignity is a conglomeration of every human act that I have freely chosen. So this morality that we have as Christians, this 20 pages of reading that I'm giving you, there's a lot behind it. Philosophically, there's a lot behind it. It goes all the way back to Aristotle. We got so much based on Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, so many theologians, moral theology. I've had class upon class upon class, and I've read book upon book upon book about moral theology. But whenever Rick really gets right down to it, what is morality? Morality is the way. Jesus Christ is the way, right? So just yesterday, I gave a homily because yesterday was the feast of Matthew, the tax collector. And he's the classic. He lived a sinful life and then he followed Jesus, right? He walked away. And I think we need to remember what tax collectors are. Tax collectors are what Mad Men is. They're the partiers. They're the people that got all the money. They got the schnaggles going on. They kind of do what they want to do. They sort of live their life freely, loosely, the way that they want to. It doesn't matter. Drugs, alcohol, sex, fidelity, infidelity. The reason why tax collectors were like that is not only were they collecting taxes for the empire or for Judaism, whatever they're collecting taxes for, but they would actually lie as to how much the other person could get. And like a car salesman, if you can get more money, you get more money, and you pocket the excess. So you're shoveling to the empire what they want, but you're pocketing excess. So you're raking in the dough. So people hated tax collectors because they were always liars and cheaters, and they were just trying to get into it. Well, then they are also the party people. They were the people who could afford the money. Come on over. I got vats of wine. I got the pad that people want to play in. And so then they can get into fornication and sexuality and the drinking and the alcohol and the stuff like that. And they lived a loose life. And if you read the scriptures, Jesus walked into Matthew's house. He was there. The next line is, why are you eating with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus says it's not the healthy that need a physician, it's the sinners that do. And what's so funny about this is Matthew was there with all his posse around him, and this Jesus dude comes in and says 2 words, follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. Wow. So I told the kids it takes 4 things to convert. The first one is faith. Faith. Matthew had no proof. He didn't listen to this man. He wasn't like walking around listening to him talk, and then all of a sudden he had a rational conversion to Jesus Christ, and like, this guy knows what he's talking about. No, there was a charisma about Jesus Christ that spoke to Matthew's heart, that by faith he was able to say, there's more here than all of this. Than all of this, there's more here. And he followed out of faith. But why did he follow out of faith? Is out of inspiration. He was inspired by this man, the Spirit of Jesus Christ himself, encapsulating the Spirit of Jesus. And notice who possesses the gospel message? Everybody. Everybody is a subject of the gospel. Jesus walked into the party place and said, follow me, and somebody walked out. There is no place that is so seedy or so evil that the gospel cannot be proclaimed. Because someone is there who needs to hear it. And when they hear it, it moves them, it inspires them. Faith, inspiration, audacity. Matthew walked out of his own house to go follow Jesus, leaving his friends behind. Dude, Matthew, where are you going? What are you doing, man? I'm following this guy. He's a long-haired hippie. You don't even know who he is. His tunic's just like one piece. Come on. So out of fashion. You're going to follow him. You're going to leave it. Hey, what are we supposed to do? You want us to lock your house? Don't care. I'm following Jesus. Audacious. Each of you are in a context where your social world has said something to you about this. If you've talked to people in your social world about becoming Catholic, you've probably had to explain why. There's an audacity. People are putting maybe pressure on you. Are you sure? Why would you? Go be Jehovah's Witness. Don't be Catholic. St. Matthew, he had to walk away from that. There's an audacity to walking away knowing that other people are going to talk, they're going to ask questions, they're not going to understand, they may judge, they may even reject. They may just sit there and say, if you're doing that, I can no longer be around you. And how many friends did Matthew lose that day? And then it takes humility. Humility to know that he has the answer and I don't. Because Matthew changed leadership. He was the party boss. And then this random guy comes in and says 2 words, follow me, and he says, I can step in line. I'll get behind you. Think of the power of grace that happened at that moment for him. For his world just to go shoo. And that meant that he left fornication behind. He left alcoholism behind. He left extortion behind. He left wealth behind. Jesus says, anybody who gives up house and land and mother and father and child for my sake will inherit 100 times more in the kingdom to come. But as for you, pick up your cross, deny yourself and follow me. This is the way. And the way has a practical consequence in every decision we make. So, my cousin, I'm going to use this as an example for a long time. She just walked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. Yeah. She set out as a single woman, early 30s. I'm doing this. She had a backpack that was between 20 and 24 pounds. Her tent was 19 ounces. Her tent, 19 ounces. Crazy. She ended up meeting up all sorts of people and going on the way and everything like that, but she had to make a choice to stay on that Appalachian Trail for 185 days, an average of 20 miles a day, some days 30. And every day she woke up, she had to stick to that trail. And if she got lost, she had to find it. If a tree fell over it, she had to find it. If she had to divert 3 miles to go to a grocery store to get food, she had to come back to the trail. And that's the moral life. Jesus says, follow me. We follow the leader who's in front of us. The book of Hebrews, Jesus is the leader and perfecter of our faith. Follow him, Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. And that means we give up cussing, and we give up division, and we give up mindless arguments, and we have the humility to listen to the Word and make the Word a part of our life, to pray every day, and to worship the living God, and to say, Jesus, I trust in you, and I believe in you, and whenever I'm too stupid to make the right choice, I know you're going to be merciful. Because Catholics don't believe that we're just going to change and everything's just going to be hunky-dory. That's the reason why we have confession. We know our weaknesses can be habits, and our habits can get in the way of living a good life. And we also know that it's possible for a good person to make a really bad choice, to know what's wrong and to do it anyways. And it all goes back to the devil. I mean, that's like my first conversation with you guys way back when, right? How could Satan not choose God? That's a mystery. He was Satan, Lucifer, the largest of all angelic beings, which means he's the largest created being in all of God's creation. Most intelligence, most beauty, most understanding. He had everything. He looked at God and said, thanks but no thanks, and walked away. With the largest possibility of created understanding, he could look at God and say, thanks but no thanks. Free will allowed him to reject the living God. And if that can happen to Lucifer, it can happen to us. It can happen to us. So in this understanding then of the way, We want to know that God has given us a path and a clear indicator of how we're supposed to live. So let me finish on some terms here. In Catholicism, we think of three categories: venial, serious, and mortal. Venial, serious, and mortal. Venial is a small sin. It's the white lie. It's the slip of a cuss word. It's the fish fillet at 8:30 p.m. It's taking that extra drink that we shouldn't have had, an alcoholic drink. It was just one more alcoholic drink. It wasn't drunk. It was just stupid. I just shouldn't have taken that next one. We need to remember what sin is. Sin is not a leech that attaches to our face and starts sucking our blood. Sin is just, it's a mistake. It's literally a mistake. So in the history of the word sin, it was actually an archery term. That if you were shooting a bow and arrow at a target and you missed the center, you sinned. That's all it is. It's just missing the mark. Close but not there, right? So if we weren't quite as honest as what we could be, or we were a little passive-aggressive because we really didn't want to say what we needed to say the first time, or if we're just flat out rude. I did that to a person in the store the other day. I felt like an idiot. I'm like, she was doing her job, and I was just a jerk. What was that? Those can be small sins. Those are missing the mark. We weren't right. We weren't on target. We weren't virtuous. We weren't doing what we knew was right. And we as humans, we have this instinct. It's called our conscience. It pangs us. Our family, if you've got brothers and sisters, you got a whole history of saying things you shouldn't have said. It's just... But we need to remember the serious sins, the less serious, these small sins, these are not sins that you have to go to confession for. Holy water is a reminder of our baptism. And when we attach the act of holy water to the reminder of the sacrament we have received, we are re-engaging the grace that was once given to us in baptism. Because by grace we are saved, and we live in grace. In Him we live and move and have our being. St. Paul says that. In Him we live and move and have our being. And the sacraments are not these temporary things that happened to us years ago. They are actually sustained acts of God's grace, which we have to basically drink from, like drinking from a water fountain. When we use something like holy water, we're not performing an action that's doing something new. We're reminding ourselves of a grace that's ever present to us. The forgiveness of Jesus Christ is ever present to us. But the visible thing that we are doing reminds us of the invisible reality that touches our soul. Okay? So we don't have to use holy water. A sincere act of sorrow can forgive small sins. Like the tax collector in the back of the church in the Bible, "Forgive me, Lord, I am a sinful man." He was forgiven at that moment, right? The woman who came into Jesus Christ and started crying on His feet and washed His feet with her own tears, that was an act of forgiveness. So a sincere act of sorrow on our part can forgive venial sins. It's called an act of contrition, an act of true sorrow. When you go to Mass, the reason why we say, "I confess to you, Almighty God, and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have sinned through my fault, through my most grievous fault," that's an act of sorrow that actually washes our soul of the small sins so that we can receive Jesus in purity. Okay? Because sin has a spiritual character to it that marks grace. It's basically spiritual graffiti. And when we through sorrow profess ourselves sinners, Jesus Christ's grace comes to us and He gets the graffiti off our soul. He makes us what He refers to in Ephesians as the beautiful bride, the bride. But that's not the same for serious sin, okay? And married persons know this. You know the difference between my spouse said something they should never have said and my spouse has broken our relationship. There's two different things there. And an action by which a spouse can break a relationship, you know it, and that spouse knows it too. Maybe it was an act of defiance, maybe it was something more serious than that. Who knows what it could have been? And in our relationship with Jesus Christ, it's possible for us to reject the relationship so that we can choose ourselves over Him. It's adulterous. And I'm not just saying adultery, but it's the act by which we are unfaithful to Jesus who's given us this way. And that's whenever a serious sin becomes mortal. So a serious sin is not mortal if it's not freely chosen. So, I don't know, let's say that what do you want to say? Not like adultery could be an accident. Well, let's just say missing Sunday Mass, right? The only time it can be mortal is if you freely choose to do so. You're going to Sunday Mass, you blow a tire, you miss Sunday Mass, that's not a sin. You're coming back from a vacation, you miscalculate, you can't get to Sunday Mass because you missed the time to go. Well, you didn't create a sin, you just didn't plan properly there. That's different than waking up in the morning, looking at your clock, going, it's 8:30, we got 9 a.m. Mass, snooze, So mortal has to be free and known. You have to know it. You have to know it. So whenever it comes to abortion, if a man or a woman procured an abortion in any way inside the church, that's a serious sin, obviously. And that goes back to the earliest writings of Christianity. There's a writing called the Didache, which is the writing of the 12. It's actually the first 100 years of the church. And in that writing, in the first 100 years of the church, there was a statement against killing a child in the womb. So if a person, either male or female, freely acted in the process by which an unborn child was unjustly aborted, then they incur not only a mortal sin, but on that one they actually incur an excommunication. So in other words, that sin is so serious that it actually cuts you off not only from Christ spiritually, but also from the church itself. And it's an excommunication by the fact of the act. So for example, me as a priest, if I ever say anything in the confessional publicly, that act stops my priesthood. It's over. I don't have to wait for a bishop. I don't have to wait for anybody else to say, hey, you did something. No, the act by the act stops it. So abortion, that's another act that can stop it. And not only am I cut off from Jesus spiritually, I'm cut off from the church. And then I got to go by myself and tell the bishop, look, I did this because right now I am excommunicated. And if I start celebrating any Mass, it's actually illicit for me to celebrate any Mass because I performed an act that separated me from the community of the people. Well, something like an abortion, if a person did not know as an excommunication, they're not excommunicated. They didn't have that knowledge. So that penalty does not apply to them. Or let's say, for example, that a person was in such a situation that they didn't fully or freely intend for the abortion to happen in any way. I don't know, let's say that there was some kind of random surgery that was going on. It was a procedure that was complicated anyways. Let's say it was a young girl. She has this procedure, it's a cyst, it's something else like that, and the dad's kind of like, hey, can you take the baby out too? Well, the girl didn't do that. The dad, if he actually did that, he did that. So a mortal sin has to be freely and known. It has to be known. You don't sin by accident in order for it to accrue to me as guilt. And that's the same like with venial sins. If you don't know that a sin is a sin, then it can't accrue to you as guilt. But it's whenever you know it and you do it anyways, that's when it accrues to you as guilt on that. So in order for us to know the good life, they gave us the 10 Commandments, right? So that's the start. That's the list of thou shalt nots. And God started us on a path from that. As a matter of fact, 10 Commandments were way too complicated. Jesus like, can't do 10. So I'm going to give you 2, which was actually a sneaky 3, but he knew that 3 was too much, so he just gave us 2. And the 2 was love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. The sneaky 3 is that you love yourself too. Right? But the commandments, whenever we think of the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have strange gods before me. Well, idol worship, worship of idols. Have I told you guys about my study of the New Testament, Pauline and Gospels, where I underlined every word for sin? Okay, so I came up with 264 unique Greek words that referred to a particular human action that was a sin. And among those, there's about 12 categories. And among the 12 categories, the most frequent sin that St. Paul referred to among all the corpus was irreligion, a lack of religion. It was having strange gods. You know, and today, that's not so much for us like idol worship or amulets or things like that. It could be, you know. Things like as witchcraft or wizardry or putting our hope into horoscopes or going and... What's that? Crystals, yeah, you know, new agey kind of things, or getting your palm read, or Ouija boards, you know. All that stuff, that's all avenues for evil spirits to get to people, and evil spirits exist. It is possible to have an evil spirit attached to you and follow you around and badger you. And those things are avenues by which they can come. The scriptures reveal it. It happened to Saul. The witch in Saul, he's like, you lied to me, you're Saul. You were trying to kill all the witches, and now you come talking to a witch. What are you doing? Well, Saul had strange gods. Strange gods. So we can have like true gods that are strange. Hindus believe in all those gods. There's other gods out there. You know, there's the Hare Krishnas that believe in whatever they believe, and I think of that just because of Mad Men, sorry. But for us, maybe our God is binge watching. Maybe our God is alcohol. Maybe our God is overeating. Maybe our God is luxury, you know? All the pretty stuff that we have. Maybe our God is our balance in our bank account. You know? So many people can live like Ebenezer Scrooge, you know? They don't even spend their money, they just count it. Maybe our God is gossip. Maybe our God is fame. Maybe our God is beauty, the size of our waist. Maybe our God is other people's opinion of me. But we become what we worship, and we worship what we focus on. And if there's anything that has more focus in our life than Jesus Christ or the Father who sent him, then we've got a strange God. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Blasphemy. That is different than the flippant use of God. A lot of people say if I just say, you know, God, or, you know, take Jesus' name out of context and things like that, that somehow that's a mortal sin. No, I mean, blasphemy is whenever you try to take the name of God as a source of power and apply it against God's will to an evil with malice. It's a malice is really the word here. Malice is the degree of hate with which something is done. If I maliciously use God's name, if I maliciously use Jesus Christ, now you're talking blasphemy. You're talking the real use. I can't go into much detail on this because we just don't have time. But that's different than the flippant use of God. Now that's the flippant use of God or the flippant use of the name of Jesus Christ outside of proper context. That's just inappropriate, right? Remember to keep holy the Lord's Day. We already talked about Sunday Mass. But to remember, too, we don't do servile work on Sunday. We've lost that. You know, I have often said that ancient Israel worked to get out of Egypt so that they could have one day to worship. And the rest of human history has been trying to work on that one day of worship. It's like, we tried to get away from Pharaoh once. Why are we running back to Pharaoh? You know, how many stores, how many shops are all open? You know, it's the reason why Chick-fil-A does a great thing for us. It just reminds us you can be a successful business and not be open. And usually it's Sunday afternoon whenever I realize they're not open. Oh, Chick-fil-A. Have you guys ever seen that video, the YouTube video? The guy, Chick-fil-A. He sings Chick-fil-A to that Beatles song. Sometimes we seem so far away. Honor your father and your mother. This also has to do with authority. There's a concept. True or false statement? Today's society honors authority. And everybody says, false. Wow, right? Defund the police, hate the military, hold every governor, everybody, every politician in suspicion. Priests have lost their right to be trusted, carte blanche. We trust no authority. It's almost like authority is the enemy. But honoring your father and your mother is not just simply our parents, but it's also all in authority. But even our parents have lost that, right? How many parents have just given up their authority? They've given it up as if they're supposed to serve their children. You shall not kill. This is going to be both killing and the actual act of killing, specifically unjust killing, which is not the same thing as justified war. But that's also killing character, gossip, scandal. 2 words, calumny and detraction. These are big words. Calumny is whenever you spread a lie about another person that's not true, which is basically Facebook. Detraction is whenever you spread a truth about another person that damaged their character, which is Instagram. No, I'm joking. But seriously, think about it. Think about the primary content that's on so many of our social media things. It's completely trashing people. How many kids have almost been completely destroyed by things that have been said? Suicides have happened from it, right? Horrible, horrifying. Calumny and detraction. Calumny is a lie that just damages a character. Detraction is a truth that damages a character. Shall not commit adultery. Jesus took that one to a whole new level. He's like, it's not even that you touch a person. You don't even think about a person that way. So Jesus' freedom goes to the very interior core of the human person. The Christian bar is so high, but here's the truth. I learned this whenever I was the chaplain at Bishop Carroll. Children will live up to your lowest expectation. And it's not because they're being flippant about it. It's just the law of conservation of energy. You will expend as much energy as you have to be able to get the job done. And if a parent has a low bar, that child will go to that bar and be done. The higher the bar that gets there, 2 things happen. 1, a child will raise up to that bar or resent their parent. Human freedom. A child can hate it. Can hate it. Jesus Christ raised the bar as high as possible. He didn't even just sit there and say, don't commit adultery. He said, don't even think lustfully about another person. Because if you even think lustfully about the other person, you have already committed adultery with that person. It's just like, and the apostles go, Jesus, then who can be saved? You know? That's actually a line. You got to leave your father, your mother, your sister, your brother. And the apostles go, then who can be saved? He goes, it's impossible for man, but for God all things are possible. For God all things are possible. We can live at that bar. And part of the frustration of Catholicism is we are so articulate that it's easy to resent us. It's easy to resent a parent who holds a child highly accountable. I've actually watched an adopted daughter reject her adopted parents who adopted her as an infant because their accountability is so high she didn't want to do it. She rejected the family and left the house, even though that family adopted her. Human freedom can resent the standard by which we live. And have you ever wondered the question why Catholicism is the favorite punching bag of media? I mean, more than any other denomination, you will hear hatred spewed at Catholicism more than any other. The reason why is because we articulate what we teach so clearly that you can hit it. I mean, try to get in a fight with Jell-O. You just punch right through it. But if you hit a wall that has substance, the church teaches about contraception. I mean, every time I mention contraception and sin in the same sentence as a Catholic priest, there's a part of me that goes, because I know how many people are using contraception. And I know how hard it is for people to come to understand why that is a problem. Because from worldly point of view, it's kind of like, dude, all we're doing is applying our brain to the human act and just kind of doing what we do. And I remember being exasperated with a professor in school. We had gone on through Moral Theology 1, Moral Theology 2. We were talking about John Paul II. And he has this beautiful expose called The Theology of the Body. And he was talking about the theology of the body, and the theology of the body is all a defense about the human sexual system, human sexuality, specifically contraception. So the point of theology of the body is to put behind it the theology that really respects the woman and the man's sexual systems, and that we should not impede the natural way of doing things. I raised my hand to this professor, who's a Jesuit, and I go, Father Murphy, I said, this is great. I said, you have spoken eloquently, and you have given me so much understanding. I said, but this is ridiculous. I go, I have had 8 years of seminary. I've gone through master level theology to come to an understanding of this teaching of morality that is about contraception, its use or its not use. How is the common person in the pew supposed to understand this? You know what he said to me? He goes, I don't know. I go, what? He goes, I'm the Jesuit. I'm teaching you. You're the diocesan priest. You go teach them. Yeah, exactly. It's my job. But there is a beauty to it. And whenever you actually do get into the fact that the woman's sexual system is an incredible part of her body, that if you mess with that, you mess with everything. And a man's sexual system, vasectomies. It is a fully working organ and you cut it off. It's kind of like saying, I got a problem eating, so I take off my tongue. Well, you don't damage the body to spite the function. So there's some things here that whenever we apply our mind, we can come to understand. But what I am saying is that at first blush, when you hear these teachings of the church, it's easy to go, those Catholics, they just, whatever, they're just throwing it out there to throw it out there, aren't they? You just do what you do. And that's about, a lot of Catholics. Well, just whatever, do what you do. The bar is high, but holiness, it's freedom. It's freedom when we choose it. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. We've already talked about some of that. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods. All of that leads us up to Jesus' list, which is much more beautiful, which is the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes, John Paul II called the Beatitudes the portrait of Christ's face. The portrait of Christ's face. To know the Beatitudes is to know what Jesus looks like. And I need to find the Beatitudes. Well, I can't find them. That's okay, we're at 732 now. So, without being able to go through the Beatitudes, there's one final point that I want to make, and it's about temptation and the natural movements of the human body. The natural movements of the human body. We need to remember that there's human acts and there's acts of a human. A human act is like blinking. Another human act is arousal. A body can be aroused. Men and women can have aroused bodies. Arousal is not a sin. Okay? What you do with the arousal, whether you direct it towards fruitfulness in a committed relationship of marriage, that's one thing. If you use it sexually to yourself, you masturbate, you do whatever else to use that to your own selfish advantage, you use perverted thoughts to be able to get into that, that's sinfulness. But human acts are non-moral. Arousal is a human act that's non-moral. But what happens with all sorts of things is the temptation that arises. Context of sin gives rise to temptation. So whenever I was in high school, we were in my buddy's RX-7, which is a little sporty kind of car that happens to be the size of golf pathways. Like on golf courses, you can fit an RX-7 on a golf course pathway. Well, we were sitting in front of the we were sitting in front of the golf pathway going, this will fit. That was teenage boys and temptation. We turned away. Not every time, though. Like the time that I got caught on top of Dodge Elementary playing ninja by the police officer that then took me home. I had to wait for like a half an hour for my dad to come home. My brothers were piping me up. He's going to beat your butt. You're blah, 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 blah. He comes home. I'm sorry. He's like, and I'm like, really? Temptation. Temptation is to human freedom what a test is to the mind, what an athletic game is to an athlete. To the degree that a human person is free, temptation will exist because it always admits the possibility of not choosing what's right. Always. Temptation itself is not a sin. A thought that comes to the mind, a desire that moves the heart, whenever temptation is presented like an apple before us, it is not the sin. Temptation is the moment of human freedom, the choice to be virtuous rather than vicious, the choice towards the good and away from evil. As Moses said, choose today who you will follow. Choose good and avoid evil. It's really the moral point. It's the way. You have to know what evil is to avoid it. Temptation is the moment of choice between good and evil. But when you choose for the good, you exercise your human freedom for holiness. Holiness. All that, in one way or another, is going to be in some of your writings there. There's more stuff about God's law and things like that. Next week, we're going to get practical. I'm going to bring with me next week an examination of conscience that will actually list sins, and we'll read through the examination of conscience, and I'll talk about it from like individual human actions. And then there's a lot of stuff I just cut out. Like, did you guys ever get a full teaching on marriage here? Marriage and family? Father Ming did it? Good. Okay, so there's some things out there that still are going to be, your Catholic education is just going to have to continue. You can't give up on it. You have to find those contexts. And I will say this, if you can get to an Acts retreat, and I know there's an Acts retreat coming up here for women in 2 weekends, and then one for men at the end of October. If you can get to an Acts retreat, do so. It's very powerful. It's a way to keep your education going, a way to get yourself into the community of faith and things like that. But next semester we'll have more Acts retreats. We'll continue to have those retreats. They're not a one and done thing. We'll do that. So, okay, questions, comments. A million little things. That's it. Is it a million? No, a million tiny perfect.
I don't know. A million little things is about mental health. So I didn't know if that was.
That's not the one. It's tiny perfect things. It's like a million tiny perfect things, or many tiny perfect things, or.
Okay, I just thought that.
Yeah, tiny perfect things. It was really good. It was one of those kind of like, oh, this is going to be cheesy. I'm not going to like this. And then it's like mesmerizing. Very, very good. Next week, we'll be going through the mechanics of confession. So we will actually walk you over. I'll let you see the confessional. I'll let you be in there, see what it feels like, what it looks like. Some people want to go face to face. Some people want to go behind a screen. How does that work? Yada, yada, yada. Yes?
Oh, okay. Because my partner came and did it when we were here. He came and did it. He said it's actually he did it on Sunday.
Sure. If he did it in here, face-to-face can happen if you just pull the screen back. Yeah, there's a little cloth. Yeah, there's a little cloth screen. All you do is just pull it back and put it back. That's it? Just tiny perfect things? Okay. Yep. I've actually was so moved by it, I'm going to have my 7th and 8th graders watch it, and then I'm going to talk to them about the meaning and the message behind it.
The story of the child and the grandfather who's walking around the neighborhood leads to a
Nope.
day of shared wonders. They discover all
Nope,
sorts.
that's not it.
Okay, well, that might have been.
So Amazon,
You want me to go to Amazon?
Go to Prime.
You want to Amazon Prime
Video.
Video.
And then just,
Yeah.
here we go.
Oh, okay, go ahead. You
I
want
think
me
it's
to
like
try
in the,
Tiny
oh, you
Perfect
don't have it.
Things?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll find it.
Yeah, it is.
Happens if you've forgotten a mortal sin, like in your past or something, and so you've never confessed it, but
Good.
you're not aware of it.
Yeah. Bring this up again next time because that will be part of our conversation. But if you like go to confession and you know that you did something in your past, but you forgot to say it and it was like really serious, then you just say it at your next confession. But every confession is a forgiveness of all sins. So you know, God doesn't reserve forgiveness kind of like, oh, you didn't say that one, so I'm going to hold you. Right? No, so every time you go to confession, this is exactly what we'll talk about next week. So we're anticipating next week. God bless you guys. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Have a great night. See you guys next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we are going to meet in my office because they're going to do Mass in here, so we'll go back that direction. Okay? What? The movie? Let me go find it. No, just put in Perfect Things. Tiny Perfect Thing, that's right. So we celebrate Mass every day. Tomorrow night we have, so kids who do not go to Catholic schools, they go to Mays, they go to Wilbur, they go wherever else, they have a religion class every Wednesday night. And once a month we have Mass for those kids so that they can understand Mass, participate in Mass, and go to communion.
Before Shekinah is taking place in here, Mass.
At that, correct, because PSR just started in September. Now, so next week is PSR, then 2 weeks after that's going to be Mass again. Or, I'm sorry, Shekinah again.
Just wondering,
Yep,
something I don't remember happening.
correct. It's because our PSR program started in September, and the PSR kids, those who are going to religion class at night, they do Mass once a month during the religion classes. So right now on campus, our RCA is happening, the other new RCA is starting, PSR is happening over there. Then we have a middle school youth ministry that's happening right now downstairs. Then we will all leave, and then the high school youth ministry will come from 8 to 9:30. So Wednesday night's just a shuffle of hundreds of souls. Did you find the name? The map of tiny perfect things, that's it. The map of tiny perfect things.
Why did you have this interim RCIA?
I have done that before. So an indirect context. I went away for higher education. I got a license in the new evangelization, sharing the faith with people. So while we were going through that, part of sharing the faith is then what happens whenever they say, yeah, we want to become Catholic, well, then you have RCIA and you kind of move through it. So that was sort of the context, the background of it. But then whenever I was pastor out at Clonmel, and whenever I became pastor here, there's times whenever people come in February, March, April, and say, hey, you know, I want to be Catholic. And I can't think of a more horrific look of the church than say, great, come back next September. We're so excited to have you. We're going to put you on hold for 6 months. There are elements of Catholicism that can become so programmatic that we forget how rude it is to a person who knows nothing of Catholicism, but actually sits there and says, look, I'm really into this. I really want to do something with this. Can I do something with that? Well, we can sit there and say, well, we got a program. The program starts in September, and this program's involved. We're not even doing the full thing, because over there they're going to have meals and they've got people breaking out and they got all sorts of stuff going on. So we are the only parish that I am aware of that if a person comes to us in March, April, May, we will discern whether or not we should then start an RCIA. And at that point, then I just open it up to whoever wants to come. So of my 6 years here, we have had 3 or 4 summer RCIA programs. And we always enter them in on October 4th, which is the Feast of St. Francis, or around October 4th. But we do it on the Solemnity of St. Francis. So that means that we start somewhere around March and then we get done here, which is the same amount of time as from September to March, which is the normal time to do so. So long and the short of it is, the Stones and I had a conversation, and that was where we started there. And then from there, you started hearing all the pulpit announcements, and that's where Cammie tapped in and said, hey, I think I can do this. And we had Justin and his girlfriend, who Justin went off to boot camp, kind of doing that. I hope he's doing well. And then John Mills stepped in as well. And John's gone through his own process of formation, so he is at a point where his education will allow him to enter in here on October 4th as well. 2nd, I should say. So that's why. Kind of a conglomeration of things, but in the end, it's hospitality. You're welcome. Thank you. This has been incredibly engaging to me. Every group of RCA has had a different context. You guys have been very free with your questions, very engaged. Like the whole idea of stop at an hour and then have a half an hour of conversations. For most RCAs, that kind of just sort of peters off. It's like, you guys have been engaging in the conversation, you've been staying in the game, you've been getting around, you've not been afraid to ask hard questions, and to not settle for an unanswered question. And so I have benefited so much from this just because of that.